All right, everyone, we are live again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Huru. Thank you so much for joining us. Guys, hit that like button again. Please hit the like button as you come to the chat room. Please share. Please subscribe. Go to dynastymirror.com. Guys, the down for the travel site is down right now. We had to migrate to new servers, and that's taking a minute. It was supposed to be done on Saturday, but in fact, let me see. Let me see if we're back up and running. And the company I use, they're not open on the weekend. They don't offer 24-hour. Yeah, they're not. It's not up. They don't offer 24-hour customer service. They just do it on the weekends because whenever, like my domain, my extension .africa. So donfo.africa. That's the name of the new tourism site, travel site. And not too many extensions can support the .africa extension. So the one company that I found, they're only open during the week. So I have to wait for them to shout out to African Wahala in the chat room. So I have to wait for them to open tomorrow to figure out what's going on. So we are down currently on the downflow.africa site, but it'll be back up and running tomorrow. We'll make sure we'll get everything taken care of. But guys, like, share, subscribe, go to dynasty.com, go to searchforhoover.com. Shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson for the super chat. My attorney, Nigerian brother Ebube.
Shout outs to O'Shea Duke Jackson. And also to O'Shea, my condolences with the recent loss of Kim the Comic, a very talented brother. I used to check out some of the material on Ken Gonda and some of the other things that were with the struggle wood. That was a very talented brother. My condolences and sorry for your loss, and that was really a loss for all of us.
Yeah, so everyone, thank you for joining. O'Shea, shout out, and everybody once again, shout out to O'Shea in the chat room. I think O'Shea, you in Uganda? I know you out of Poland. I think you're out of Poland, so you must be in Uganda. So without further ado, guys, we have brother Ebube Okoli, our in-house lawyer here at Search for Uhuru, everyone. And today's topic, we're going to be discussing why Africans are focusing more on Ukraine versus what's going on in Mali right now. Somebody said no sound. Can you guys press one if you can hear? No, we got sound. That's you, Richard. You need to turn on your speakers. Turn up your volume, Richard. Turn up your volume, brother. Turn it up. So today we're going to be discussing, why are Africans, the planet really, why are they more focused on Ukraine versus what is going on in Mali right now? Because there's a low-key invasion going on in Mali with France. And rumor has it, France is also funding the rebels in the northern part of Mali, the Tuareg groups, whatnot, allegedly. We're going to say allegedly. So we're going to get into that. And also, Ebube, if he could give his input on what's going on in Ukraine right now, then we'll go into what's going on in Mali and all that good stuff. Put a bow on it, wrap it up like a nice gift, and hopefully you guys enjoy what brother attorney Okoli has to say. So, Ebube, go ahead, brother. Introduce yourself.
All right. First off, it's good to be back. This is our first show of the new year, and I'm glad to be here. Glad to be alive and feel good and keep it going. Now, for those who don't know me, my name is Ebube Okoli. I'm a Nigerian-born, American-trained attorney and geopolitical analyst. I'm also the host of Up Close and Center. New content is coming. Some new content is coming today. But corruption visited. That documentaries. The war is ready. The documentaries as well as.
Okay, you were breaking up, but go ahead. You're fine now, but you were just breaking up, but go ahead.
Can you hear me now? All right. So yeah, my name is Ebube Okoli, Nigerian-born, trained attorney and geopolitical analyst. I'm the host
and we're losing you again. Let me make sure it's just not me, guys. In the chat room, press 1 if you're having issues hearing Ebube, but it's going in and out. Or maybe it just might be me, but press 1
second,
if it's Ebube, press 2 if it's me.
1 second, Dennis. Let me check on something.
Okay. Yeah, they're saying it's on your end, Ebube. Okay, 15,000 UGX. Let's see what that is when we convert that to USD. Let's see here. Okay, so 15,000. Shout out to O'Shea for the $4 super chat. O'Shea, you can round that up to $5, brother. O'Shea, you know you can round that $4.17 up to $5. O'Shea, come on, O'Shea. Come on, stop acting like a brother, a cheap brother from the Heights, and round that $4 up to $5. O'Shea, come on now. You know you can do that, O'Shea. Well, we're waiting for Ebube to come back online with us.
All right. So how we sounding now?
You sounded better. Go ahead.
There we go. All right. Let me see if I can get through this introduction without there being any distortion.
I was about to say, you got to repeat. You got to do the introduction again. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Ebube Okoli, Nigerian born, American trained attorney and geopolitical analyst. Center. You got to subscribe. Go check out the logo. Looks like this. White lettering, black circle.
Ebube is doing it again.
All right, going on. What is possibly going on?
Yeah. Ebube is in Atlanta. He's not in Nigeria, so we can't blame Glow and MTN on this one.
So what's going on? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now. Go ahead. Let's see if we get through it. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna start. I'm ready to cook. Let's go ahead and
go ahead and cook.
Food is ready.
Go ahead and cook. All right. So okay, as far as what's going on in Ukraine, let's start there. What's going on in Ukraine right now? Because obviously we're not getting the full story. I think we're getting a very biased, Western biased point of view versus the Russian side, and we know you're balanced, Ebube. So what do you think is going on in the Ukraine?
All right. So what's happening in Ukraine is this really goes back to 1991 when the Soviet Union actually collapsed. There was an agreement. First off, what NATO is really created to prevent Soviet expansion.
Hey, Ebube, you think you want to use your phone? Maybe I don't know what you're using. It's still it's still going in and out. Shout out to Miss Sweetdog for the super.
You know what?
Thank you, Shirley. Yeah, it's still the connection still. Somebody said buckle.
You know what, Dennis?
Be quiet, real quick.
Give me a second. Let me use my phone. Okay. Give me a second.
Okay. Shout out to Miss who's in the chat room. Now, what I'll do while Ebube gets situated, if you guys want to call in and add to the conversation, link is in the chat room. Again, links in the chat room. If you'd like to call in and add to the conversation, link is in the chat room. And guys, once again, thank you for joining. We're just getting situated here. Like I said, we're having some technical difficulties. And no, Ebube is not in Nigeria. So we can't blame Glow. We can't blame MTN. We can't blame Orange. This is on Xfinity or AT&T. That's what this is on. So guys, links in the chat room. Okay, here goes Ebube over here. Let's see here.
All right, there we go. Where there is a will, there is a way. Let's make this thing happen. Set this down so that I can be fully hands-free. All right.
Go ahead.
I think that works.
That'll work. Let me put myself on mute while you talk. There's no feedback. So go ahead.
Hey, Dennis, you're muted.
No, I'm going to mute myself because there's feedback. So you go ahead and talk. I'll just keep myself muted.
Dennis,
No, I keep muting myself because there's feedback. You can't hear me? I'm unmuted. No, I muted myself. Oh, he froze up on us. No, he froze up on us. Hopefully, he comes back here shortly. What's RPT Wi-Fi? I never heard of RPT Wi-Fi, Elia. That must be something new. Never heard of RPT Wi-Fi. Help me out, Elia. What's RPT Wi-Fi? What is RPT? Yeah, something ain't right. Hold on. He's getting it together. He'll be back here shortly. But guys, links in the chat room. If you want to call in and add to the conversation, you're more than welcome to. Once again, link is in the chat room. If you'd like to call in and add to the conversation, here we go. African Wahala, go ahead. African Wahala, go ahead.
Hello, brother.
Good.
Yes. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to keep you company until Ebube's internet is fixed.
Yeah.
How's
it going in Canada right now?
Yeah, it's good. Same old stuff. Expensive gas, expensive food prices. Same thing happening all over the world,
What do you think is really going on behind the scenes, Wahala?
I don't know, man, to be honest, bro. It's political, people are locking horns based on their egos. I'm talking about the political elites across different countries. They have their egos and they have refused to back down. They choose to continue making up their rules, their regulations that is not beneficial for the rest of the world. And right now we are suffering the consequences in expensive gas prices and all this stuff, right? And I also wanted to say that thank you for pointing out the crisis going on in Mali, because a lot of us get distracted. We keep on watching TV. We're watching TV, being fed, being programmed by the people that want us to think a certain way, to have a certain perspective, and forgetting about the issues that we have going on in our countries. Mali has a huge turmoil, but don't be surprised, you'll find more Malians focusing on the Ukrainian-Russian situation. So thank you for bringing that up. And shout out to Ebube. Good, happy New Year, bro.
You know what? I'm still having issues hearing you. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, there's feedback. There's feedback, and I don't know if you can hear us, but there's a lot of feedback. I would say let's try to get back on your laptop and see what happens. Hey, Wally, what's going on with that? What's going on with that freedom convoy? Is that still going on? You got to unmute yourself. You got to mute yourself, Mahala.
Sorry. The convoy was squashed about 3 weeks ago. I would say about 2-3 weeks ago. The Canadian government had to enact a sort of like a martial law that gave them the powers to arrest anybody protesting with the convoy people. And a lot of people are upset. But to be honest with you, I hardly focus on all these Canadian politics. I focus more on Nigerian politics, right? So yeah, it didn't really affect me, the convoy situation.
All right, so what's going on in Nigerian politics?
2023 is brewing up. People are coming up trying to contest to be the next president of Nigeria, telling us that they want to save us from the economic turmoil, the insecurity that has ravaged a huge portion of the country. But the funny thing is, majority of these guys that are coming up trying to contest were contributors to the problems that we are facing today. So if the same people that created the mess are coming back and telling us that we are here to solve the problems, it's unbelievable, you know. So I really hope people will not continue repeating the same mistakes and expecting a different result, because we are just wallowing, walking around the same spot decade after decade after decade. That's what's going on in Nigerian politics.
So, who are some of the potential candidates?
The potential candidates. There is Tinubu, there is Atiku. The only guy that I actually like is Omoyele Sowore. And I don't even think he can become the president. And even if he magically becomes the president, I am 99% sure that any efforts that he has to improve the situation in the country will be stifled by the members of the National Assembly, the House of Representatives, because it's not that easy to get into a system that has a certain methodology and expect to reverse that in a short time, right? Especially when the system is designed to keep it a certain way where a tiny fraction of the population will have access to all the wealth, and the vast majority will continue to suffer in penury. So as much as I like Sowore, I don't even want him to win the presidency, because that will tarnish his image. People are going to get upset with him for not being able to improve their lives, and they're going to get mad at him, and it's going to destroy his legacy. That's what I have to say about that.
African Wahala, shout out to you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
sir.
hear you, Ebube. Hopefully, Ebube, we're good to go. We'll get back on topic, Ebube.
All right. So it seems like the transmission issue has been fixed. Perfect. Oh my goodness. Sometimes technology can act funny, but it seems like we're ready to rock and roll. Contribution. All right, so we're gonna get Ukraine. Dynasty, am I still good?
Coming back, Ebube. Oh man, it's coming back, Ebube. Goodness.
All right, can you hear me now?
Okay, we hear you now. It's just once you get going, it just starts freezing up.
I think somebody might be messing with our signal. I think somebody has to be messing with our signal, but
man.
I'll just continue.
Now you Okay, there you go. Okay,
What about now?
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
All right, I can go now.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody is definitely manipulating the signal somewhere. I guarantee. So with Ukraine, for example, you have to understand what NATO is and what it was and what set up. Am I good?
No, it's not. Ebube, it's not. I don't know what it is, man. I don't know what it is, Ebube.
All right, give me a second. Man. Let me okay. 1 second. Let me.
All right, the juice. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
I hear you. Go ahead.
I think part of I caught the ending of the last bit, but I think part of especially the issues with Nigeria, especially is, one thing I notice is you see China. I'm in the UK. You see Chinese students. They come over here, right? They'll study engineering. They'll do biomedicine, but they always go back to China. They always go back to China, and I think that's one of the main problems. I think with Nigeria, the diaspora of Nigeria is doing very well. Like my girlfriend is from. Is it Delta State?
Okay.
She's from there, and she's finishing her biomedicine degree at the moment, isn't it? And her family are very accomplished. Her dad's an engineer, her mum is an architect, but they don't have the mentality of we're going to go back and invest. It's more of a just complaining, if that makes sense. Whereas I think Chinese people go abroad, they'll get their education and they'll go back and develop their country. And I think, especially in the UK and the US as well, you have Nigerians doing magnificent things in diaspora, making good money, doctors, surgeons, but they don't go back and help Nigeria enough. And I think I blame that more than necessarily the politicians. There's only a certain amount of things the politicians can really do in it. There's only a certain amount they can really do in it. Otherwise, it starts. I'm a subscriber to Ebube's channel. You start getting plane crashes and all these other things. Suspicious things might start happening. But I think the diaspora, especially in Nigeria, do very well abroad. And they need to start doing more. So, for example, I heard something about Dagnote is sending people abroad to do stuff to do with like petrol engineering and stuff to work in the refinery plant. The Nigerians who work in the diaspora, whoever have those degrees, should try to go back. And even if it's going to be a sacrifice, because you're not going to make the money you're making in the West, but for the long-term future, look at it like, imagine like what China was like in like 1990 to what it is now. It's a dramatic difference. They were still having famine and these kind of issues and people leaving their children dead on the street. And look at China now. A short-term sacrifice of people, especially Nigerians in the diaspora, could make a massive difference in 20 years. And if you really want Nigeria to become a superpower, that's my opinion. You're putting too much emphasis on one man or one political party to come in and change all the problems. But I think Nigerian diaspora have the education and the resources to make dramatic changes in Nigeria right now. That's my opinion.
My bad, Juice. We appreciate you. Thank you, Juice. All right, Ebube, try and
Can you hear me, Dennis?
Let's see what happens.
When
you get going, that's when it starts.
It's like as soon as I start cooking, it's like the signal gets disrupted. It's kind of funny, but it seems like
Ebube still doing it, brother. Oh man.
All right. What about now?
It's fine. It's like once you get started, that's when it starts acting up.
Okay. Well, let me just start, and hopefully it, I'll talk slowly. Maybe that's what triggers it when I start talking fast. But we have to understand what NATO was and why it was set up initially. If you understand what Russia was doing, the incursions into Europe.
Yeah, Bube, you there? Yeah, boy, he froze up on us.
I'm here. Okay, here.
Yeah.
Should I keep going?
Yeah, it's just. Hey, Bube, maybe turn off your video. Turn off your video and start.
If he turns his video off, and maybe if he
turn off your video,
or if he can call in. I mean, we all really want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
All right. What about now? How's it sounding now?
All right, just keep going. If we have issues, I'll stop you. Go ahead.
All right. So now what we have to take a look at is NATO. So, for example, that's why NATO set up. So NATO was set up in order to checkmate the Russian invasion to the European heartland.
Ebube, you got another room you can go to?
You know what? Let me try that. Give me a second.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Shirley.
Hey, fam, just wanted to check in with you. I really appreciate your show, Dinah. So you're really on point.
I appreciate you. No
problem. Where we are in this country, I got a question, and maybe you can help me out. If you look at Ukraine and you see how they're treating these black people in Africa or whoever African nation they're from, I got 3 questions. That's my first one. What are we doing even over there? And have they always treated us horrible like that in Ukraine?
Absolutely. From my understanding, the reason why a lot of African immigrants are going to the Ukraine is because education there is dirt cheap. That's what I've been told. So if you want to become a medical doctor, like the cost is like 80% less than, if you were educated in Western Europe or in America. So that's why a lot of them are going to Ukraine, because medical education is dirt cheap. University, to get educated in university is dirt cheap. So that's number one. And yeah, they've always been racist.
Wow. I'm gonna pivot a little bit into the oil crises right now.
Oh, go ahead, do your thing, Shirley. I definitely want to hear
right now we're between $6 to $8 a gallon. There's a prediction that we're going to get to $10 a gallon in California. A lot of people are losing their mind. But remember, with this administration, the first day that Biden was in office, people didn't pay attention. He cut off all fracking and all American oil drilling. So we had to be subsidized by other countries. Right now, if you look up an article with Shell Oil just made a deal to get some barrels from Russia, which were not against the Western sanctions. So it's confusing to me because here you have America saying, oh, we support Ukraine, we love Ukraine, but yet the only oil that we're going to be getting is mostly from Russia, who is the third largest oil provider. That affects everyday people when it comes to their livelihood and their food, water, and shelter.
All right, Ebube.
All right, let's try this again. Can you hear me?
We hear you. It's just hopefully when you start cooking, the transmission doesn't disrupt. Go ahead.
All right. So hopefully nobody's manipulating our signal.
Man, they don't want you to be great, Ebube. They don't want you to be great, bro.
Only me. I swear, only me. Everything. I've tried 3 different devices.
Oh man, Ebube, they don't want you to be great today. Oh man.
Should we reschedule, or how do you feel?
Let's reschedule, but we got.
Can he call you on your cell phone, Dinas? Like if he calls you on your cell phone,
I don't think that's not gonna.
Something's better than nothing. I mean, you got over 200 people waiting to hear this brother speak. We all are excited to hear this man's vision. If he just calls on your cell phone and then you tap that in?
Let me see if I can do this. Hold on one second. Let me hold on. Let me see if I can do this. Maybe we could do it over like Google Voice. So you can talk that way, Ebube.
That's cool.
Hold on one second. All right, here we go. Hold on one second. Maybe it'll work this way. Let's see here. Guys, bear with me 1 second. Let me see here. Ebube, check your email.
All right.
Maybe you come in that way. And then what we'll do, we'll mute you here on the
Hey family, we got over 251 people waiting in the chat room. That's amazing. If you guys could please like and subscribe, please like and subscribe. Thank you for your patience. I know that we're having a little technical difficulty, but this brother has some great information he's about to share that could affect your everyday life. And for those who are in the motherland, especially over there, especially what we haven't even got into talking about China and what China might end up doing to Taiwan, and how African nations could be tied into that as well. I was reading articles where there's certain countries that are going to go in and help fight with Ukraine out of Africa. My thing in America is this a way that Americans are going to try to get sympathy and then pull us into this war of cousins? This is, Russia and Ukraine has been fighting for decades. Why are we jumping into the war? But
Shirley, how are people reacting to the gas and oil prices?
Oh, they're losing their mind. People are losing their mind. They just every time you look on Facebook or someone screaming about it's at 6, it's at 7. I say it's gonna get to 10.
But Shirley, okay, so Shirley, here we go. Hold on one second. Here we go. Let me mute myself over here. All right, Ebube, can you hear me? Ebube, hold on. Ebube, can you hear me? Ebube.
He's muted.
Oh, hold on. I'll mute it. Hold on. Ebube.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There's an echo. Hold on. Let me do it like this. Hold on 1 second. Let's see if I mute myself here. But Ebube, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Okay, I hear you. Guys, can you hear Ebube in the background? There's a. Okay, I hear you. Guys, can you hear Ebube in the background? Hey, Ebube, you're gonna have to turn off your. Oh man, I don't know if this is gonna work. Yeah, he froze up on us. Hey, Shirley, let me ask you this, Shirley. You got time tonight?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ebube, let's do this. Let's reschedule for tomorrow. And me and Shirley, we'll cook. Oh man, Shirley.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you got time. You got time tonight, Shirley?
I do. I can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. So the argument is that presidents don't control oil prices and gas prices. That's out of the president's control. Like, what are your thoughts on that comment?
I don't necessarily believe that is true. I think with this administration, we're going to talk about a lot of America because I know American politics, not so much Africa. So bear with me, family.
Go ahead, Shirley.
With American politics, these people have been in office for 30, 40, 50 years. And so if you notice, they have patterns. They have patterns on knowing that crude oil was going to go up because they set the pattern when this administration got into office. They said no more drilling in America. So where else are we going to get this oil from? Russia is the third largest oil supplier. Everything is timed. Notice how after the Olympics, we all went to war. Now, why did you wait until after the Olympics? No, you wait till right after the Olympics just to start another crisis. They've been talking about going to war since November. And so their time is really interesting. I do believe there's a parallel between politics and Wall Street and commodities, future commodities and financial commodities. We as a people don't pay enough attention to that. And that affects our everyday lives.
Okay, let's see here. Ebube, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, we hear you. All right, let's just try, man. We'll try one more time, Ebube. Now we'll
try. I really want to get cooking on this thing. Let's go. Let's do it. All right. So still in the clear?
Nah. Dang, Ebube. Oh man.
You know what? You wanna let's try again. Let's try again and knock this thing out tomorrow. Whatever it is.
Let's do it tomorrow.
It seems like there's some disruption somewhere, either intentional or unintentional, but there's some sort of issue going on here.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's roll tomorrow, but Miss Huzar, she's on right now. So Miss Huzar, we can have the conversation. We'll just talk more about American politics and how Ukraine and Russia, the Ukraine-Russia conflict has affected us here in America. Like, I'd like to hear Ms. Shirley's input on that too. But Ebube, we'll roll tomorrow. We'll figure it out.
Definitely. Any intentional or unintentional interference, we're going to go ahead and get that knocked out and fixed because at the end of the day, we have to stay informed and we have to be able to share information. That's pivotal.
Now we can understand them. Oh my God.
You clear now. You clear now. All right, let's try this one more time, Ebube.
Let's keep it going. All right, let's keep it going. All right. So I said NATO, and that's typically when I freeze up. But let's get into it in regards to Ukraine, and then we'll jump into Mali. Right? Still good? Don, give me a thumbs up. Still good. All right. So NATO, Russia at one point. You have to remember the classical situation.
God, man, it's not doing it. Man, that's blockage, man. Like you said, the minute you say NATO, it cuts off. It starts acting up when you say NATO.
Yeah.
Listen, when you say NATO,
somebody's acting up. Somebody's playing with our signal.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get them all. What we'll do, we'll let like I said, I love to hear Miss Huzar's input on what's going on here in America, how Ukraine and Russia is affecting that. But dang, man, we'll roll tomorrow. We'll figure it out.
We'll do it. We're gonna make it happen.
Okay. All right, brother. If you want to stay on and just listen, that's cool. But that's up to you.
You know what? Can you hear me now?
I listen. When you say NATO, or when you start getting into the actual conflict, that's when it starts happening.
Which makes me makes it kind of seem like maybe somebody's doing that intentionally. But I'll just talk in generalities and then I'll get into it, because right now it seems like I'm able to speak uninterrupted. Correct?
Yeah, you're fine right. You're fine right now.
All right. So now we have a situation where there was a certain military group that was set up between nations to prevent the expansion of another military group from Eastern Europe, a Slavic group, from entering Europe and completely dominating Europe because they had a lot of power. And so now this group was set up in order to prevent the expansion, and they essentially caged in the Soviets, right? And so after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there were certain agreements made that this group that was formed to prevent the Soviet expansion into Western and Central Europe wouldn't continue to expand, because all these members came up with a pact that said if any one of these members were attacked, then they would all attack the aggressor, which was the former Soviet Union. So now the agreement was that this particular group that was set up with this military treaty wasn't going to proceed past Germany. Now, when Bill Clinton got in office, he essentially added certain groups. And you have to remember that the typical aggressor nation, the former Soviet Union, is essentially the land power. So you have two theories. You have the land power and you have the sea power. And that's why certain nations will never get along. There's a great book. The name eludes me at the moment, but there's a great book written as to why certain nations will always have problems. So now the former Soviet Union was the current land power. Now China is vying for that role. And you have to remember the world is essentially three continents. The majority of the world is three continents. Asia, a peninsula that comes off of Asia called Europe, and then Africa. All of those three land masses are connected. So the strongest country on those land masses is going to be referred to as the land power within that context. And then you have the sea power. And you look at the nation, you look at America. America is essentially bounded by two of the world's great oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, and America essentially dominates both of those within their periphery. So now the clash is going to be between the sea power and the land power, which led to the problems that the Soviet Union had with America. Now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there were certain agreements that the certain military treaty organization wasn't going to push past certain points. So now with Bill Clinton coming into office, what he did is he essentially brought in, for example, Turkey, Greece, Norway, to make it so that the former Soviet Union, the heartland of the former Soviet Union, was essentially caged in because most of their ports are frozen during the winter. So if you have Turkey and Greece, who are historical enemies on the same side, they can essentially blockade any naval movement. And then if you have Denmark and Norway, for example, then they blockade that way as well. So now you've essentially caged the great beast, if you will. And so upon seeing this greatly disturbed the former Soviet Union, its major member. So after it was disturbed by what Bill Clinton did, they really had no power. And you have to remember that nations behave like animals. When a nation is powerful, it projects, it conquers, it enforces its will on other nations. Nations act just like animals. When you're weak, everybody's going to take advantage of you. If you look at China in the 1800s, everybody took advantage of China because they were weak. China is now reemerging and coming back into its strength, and it's now looking to re-exert itself and take back everything that it believes is theirs. However, certain things have been taken away for almost 100 years, but people have long memories, and so do countries. So certain countries believe that it doesn't matter how long this thing of mine was taken away, I'm going to take it back when I'm ready and strong enough. So now you have the Ukraine, and you have to remember that the Ukraine and Russia are essentially brothers. You have Ukrainians that live in Russia and Russians that live in Ukraine, and they're both indigenous. So now with these two groups, and at one point, because they were the same country, there were no defensive barriers really set up between these two nations. And you have to remember the geography. Russia, for example, is a prisoner of geography. It sits in the Great European Plain. And there's really no natural boundaries between Russia and the Ukraine. In fact, there's really no natural borders until you get to the mountains that border the former Austria-Hungary Empire and around Poland. That's why historically Russia always wanted to anchor themselves around Poland, because there are mountains to the south, and Poland essentially is the only entry point for the Great European Plain in the way into Russia. It's almost as if you imagine the border between Canada and America. There's no real natural, it's just a straight line. It's literally a figment of our imagination. You can walk through the woods in some parts of America, and if you're chasing game or deer or whatever, you'll end up in Canada without even realizing it. Now that's interesting, but that's also a liability. But America and Canada are on good terms. So now imagine if a nation like Canada became the enemy of America, and they started siding with international powers who had the incentive to destabilize America. Canada would be a very difficult enemy to have because the border is so vast. You'd have to set up and permanently station troops along this grand border, which essentially spans a large part of the American heartland. It's almost like so with Ukraine, you have to remember that Ukraine sits in the Russian heartland. It's not that far from Moscow, and all the land is flat, meaning that if you wanted to roll tanks into Russia from Ukraine, or as Ukraine was doing, they were stockpiling weapons. They were getting weapons from the Turkish, weapons from different member states in Western Europe, and they were positioning those weapons to be able to strike Russia. So now Russia essentially said, we, or they, have to strike now because it's going to get to the point where the balance of power is going to tilt in Ukraine's favor. So it's the same way, if you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, how Cuba was accepting weapons from the USSR, and they were essentially pointing those weapons at the United States. The United States says Cuba is just so many miles off of our border. We can't have sophisticated weapons being delivered to this place because this permanently threatens the United States heartland. So what certain treaty organizations wanted to do with Ukraine, and what Ukraine allowed themselves, what UNO is what we'll call them, allowed themselves. What they did is that they made certain deals with the Ukraine where they were beginning to deliver advanced weaponry into the Ukraine. And if you think about it, the border between Ukraine and Russia is so large that Russia would go bankrupt trying to station a permanent military force on the Ukrainian border. It wouldn't be able to defend that. It's just too vast. The land is too flat, and there are too many critical points at which, if you were able to militarize the Ukraine against Russia, Russia would permanently be checkmated. And so Russia said, at the end of the day, the survival of Russia is contingent on not being checkmated. So the Ukraine put itself in a position where invasion was inevitable. What I believe the Ukraine thought is that they would have more international support than what they're currently getting. However, it seems that Russia is still more powerful and has more influence than they may have anticipated. And they probably also thought that an invasion wouldn't happen, not at this point in the game. They miscalculated and thought that, you know what, we're going to go ahead and stockpile a bunch of weapons. We're going to aim them at the Russians. And then by the time we're done doing what we're going to do, we're going to be able to challenge Russia, which with time they would have been. And Russia said, you know what? Consequences be. We're going to go ahead and invade and stop your plan right now. So there's really no surprise as to why Russia invaded. However, the full story isn't truly being told. You had to kind of watch this since the time that the Crimean Peninsula was invaded. There was a reason for that. But oftentimes when things are displayed in the media, they display them in such a way where people almost oversimplify things and just say, well, this country bad, this country good, this country is doing this and it's wrong. And it's like, well, let's ask a deeper analysis. Why is this country doing this? I'm sure they didn't just wake up and decide to invade a nation. They had to have some sort of reason as to why. And typically in mainstream media, you don't get those reasons as to why this nation is invading. However, if those reasons were made clear, you would kind of understand that this is really just a situation where one nation began to put weapons in their country that potentially threatened this nation, and this nation said, hey, stop doing this. That nation said no, and then this nation said, if you don't stop, we're going to invade. And then this nation said, well, we're going to call your bluff, go ahead and invade. And then that nation actually invaded. And so what Russia's plan is there's a river that essentially bifurcates or splits Ukraine in two, and it's a very navigable river, but there's only certain cross points at the river, across the river. So now what Russia wants to do is they want to anchor themselves against that river because they're going to take Kiev and the second largest city in the Ukraine, and they're going to be able to anchor against the river and eventually dictate terms to Kiev, essentially a regime change, or get them to demilitarize, or get them to get rid of the weapons that they've been stockpiling. Now, it makes sense if you're Russia to do this, because if you wait too long, eventually the balance of power is going to change. And you're going to be at a point where it's almost like I said, it's a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis, where if America had allowed Cuba to build those advanced weapons in Cuba and point them at the United States, and get to a point where once they're fully functional, you can invade and get rid of those weapons that were stationed there.
Hey, so you sound great. You sound
I just
great.
I just gotta avoid certain words.
Certain words, right? So this group that starts with an N and ends with an O, it seems like right now they're starting a proxy war, between the Ukraine.
Definitely. The thing is that you have to
go ahead.
You have to treat a nuclear power with great respect, because at the end of the day, they can just end everything, right? It's like where this person has you in the scope, you have them in their scope. How am I sounding?
We can't say nuclear either. So we can't say nuclear. It started acting up. You said nuclear. So go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. All right. So when you have great powers with great very advanced weaponry, how am I sounding honest?
Yeah, the minute you said nuclear, started to break it up. So no nuclear and no.
What about?
Okay, just keep going. Let's see.
Okay, so now you have a great military power with great military strength, and when they have these military advancements, you have to be very careful in regards to how you treat this nation. You have to tread very light, and you also have to remember that Russia supplies a great deal of natural gas and other resources to Western Europe. And Western Europe has been seeking an alternative for quite some time. However, they still haven't been able to cut their dependency on the Russian state. Therefore, Russia still, to an extent, has some leverage in the situation. So you can't all out come at a nation with a direct war. Sanctions are there, but that's indirect warfare. Other things are there, freezing assets and the like, but before you go to war, you calculate all those things and you understand that these are going to happen. However, they're not going to deter you because you have anticipated that these things are going to happen. Dinas, how are we looking? Still good? Give me a thumbs up if perfect. All right, so just certain words we got to avoid. This has happened before in certain instances, but I understand that there are people at certain organizations that monitor certain conversations, and certain conversations they feel shouldn't be had. So let's just tread lightly and be respectful of everybody, as we always do. So now, with that nation having those situations put on top of them, they're treading lightly and they're trying to protect their sovereignty. So at the end of the day, to an extent, they are doing what they have to do as a nation, because no nation can really allow themselves to be put under such a threat. It's only natural. It's as if there's something called passive aggressiveness, and people can be very passive aggressive. And then the day where you become overtly aggressive, they now play the victim and say, look what's happening. Look what this person did to me, but they don't catalog all of the passive aggressiveness that pushed the person to reach the point that they reached. So with those two nations, it's essentially brothers having a clash because one brother decided to side with his brother's enemies, if you will. And so now we have a situation where that nation has decided to invade this nation in order to prevent that nation from acquiring advanced weaponry that would ultimately challenge the heartland of Russia, because they essentially sit in the heartland of Russia. All right, so now that's the situation between Ukraine and Russia. Now we have a certain situation in Africa where certain people are looking to pay more attention to that than what's happening actually in the backyard. And we have to ask ourselves what's actually happening in Africa. And we have to have a long memory, not too long, but we go back 10 to 12 years. And we go ahead and take a look at what happened when a certain nation in North Africa was destabilized and a certain leader was deposed. And that certain leader
in that country starts with an L, ends with an A. And the leader, his last name is the last Afi. We'll just say Afi.
Yeah. So Muammar, essentially, what happened is that nation was prosperous, and other nations decided that they were going to destroy that nation because the leader they had decided had to go. And you have to remember the nations. If you ever see The Godfather or Sopranos or any one of those movies, that's how nations act. They sit at a table and decide who needs to go and who doesn't. So that leader in that North African country was decided they had to go. So what happened is that they went ahead and got rid of him. However, you have to remember that was a stabilizing force in North Africa, and to an extent, the Sahel and the Sahara region, right? So now you have these weapons that used to be in this nation, and when a nation collapses, it's a free-for-all. So now let's say you're an army commander and you're in charge of procurement, and you just bought 100,000 weapons, and then the government collapsed. And now you have these 100,000 weapons. You've distributed a couple hundred to your immediate crew, if you will. And then you decide, hey, I'm going to contact this group and I'm going to sell them these weapons wholesale for a very low price. So now you have all these weapons floating around the Sahel and Sahara, and these might get into the hands of certain groups who want to perpetrate, for example, a jihad or anything of that nature, where they want to truly disrupt the security of the Sahel. So now, after these weapons became readily available, very sophisticated weapons. For example, there was a time 20 years ago where it was very difficult to get sophisticated weapons in West Africa if you weren't directly connected to the government. It was almost impossible. If anybody could think back and has lived in West Africa or has visited, it was very difficult to get sophisticated weaponry. The only weapons that people had were maybe pump action rifles, shotguns, things they would use for hunting. And that was the most that people had in regards to weaponry. However, if we fast forward to today, you see, for example, herdsmen or people herding cattle carrying advanced weaponry, and that was never the case. But we have to remember that once a nation is destabilized, that these weapons now are on the black market, or a parallel market, as some people call it. Some people don't like the word black market, so we use parallel market. So once these weapons enter the parallel market, there's no telling where they're going to end up. And they may end up with some people with some very nefarious objectives. And so now these people are ready to die for their beliefs, and they now enter a situation where they're ready to topple the government. And that's their objective. And before you know it, there's a full-blown insurgency, because there's asymmetric warfare happening in nations like Niger, where there was an attempted coup, happening in nations like Mali, where there was a successful coup, happening in nations like Guinea, where there was also a coup, happening in nations like Burkina Faso, happening in nations like Sudan. And you have to see, well, in Chad as well, the president was taken out, or assassinated, if that word can be used here. He was taken out. So you have to see that these nations are all contiguous if you look at it, and they're all connected to each other, and they're also connected to Libya, where a lot of these weapons began to flow from. So people who were cheering on the taking out of a certain leader of that nation, they didn't understand that what was going to happen 10, 12, and eventually 20 years down the line is that when you destabilize a nation, there are serious consequences to destabilizing that nation. So once that nation was destabilized and all these weapons began to free flow, there's now a repercussion that we're now witnessing that many people didn't actually anticipate.
I didn't know that the president of Chad was assassinated. He was just assassinated last year. I had no clue.
Well, yeah, what happened is that he was a strong man, and when I mean a strong man, a traditional strong man, he would literally take his troops to the front line. He's a very successful military man, and he wasn't like the military men that we see in some of these African nations where they sit back and they enjoy the good life and they just carry the title of general. No, he was actually a general, meaning that he's going to sleep out in the desert for several weeks with the troops and the generals in order to deal with insurgencies and handle things in that nature. So while he was at the front line, he was actually assassinated. And it's actually very rare for a president or a general who becomes president to actually still visit the front line and command troops. But that shows you what type of person that he was. So he was taken out while he was in office. Granted, he was in office for quite some time. He was referred to as a sit-tight leader. We all understand what that means. But he was in office for quite some time before he was taken out at the front line fighting the insurgents. And many of these insurgents had received weapons, sophisticated weaponry.
From Libya.
That were suspected to come from Libya and the fallout of that nation. And still currently in Libya, it's a quasi-civil war where the government doesn't have full control over the nation. You have several groups in that nation claiming legitimacy in that nation. And so it's very easy to do things because there's little government oversight, because we have to ask the question, well, which government are we referring to when we're talking about oversight? So now he's at the front line in the northern part of his country that immediately abuts and borders Libya, fighting off insurgents that can attack and then go back into the ungoverned areas. And you have to remember that the Sahara Desert, or we'll say Sahara because Sahara Desert is redundant because Sahara means desert, but the Sahara is so vast, it's the size of America. So now imagine there's a desert that's the size of America and it's really ungoverned. And it's kind of ungovernable because to an extent you have to go from oasis to oasis. And unless you have business there in that desert or in that environment, you're really not going to go there to live. So if people don't generally go there to live, the government is essentially not going to provide services there. So police officers don't go there, soldiers don't go there, they don't run power lines there. You're essentially on your own, which creates a breeding ground for all sorts of insurgent groups. So now he went to the border of Libya the president Idris Deby went to the border of Libya in order to prevent the expansion of this lawlessness into northern Chad. And unfortunately, he was taken out. So what happened was, in order to maintain power, the clique that's in Chad, that's in control, essentially crowned his son, president, which was technically against the Constitution. So it was almost like an in-house coup, but it wasn't really a coup. It was more of a non-constitutional ascendancy of power, if you will. And the interesting thing is that the French president allegedly, him and some representatives had a major hand in the coronation. Now, so we look at Chad. Chad essentially had a non-democratically elected leader take power, which some may call a coup, some may not. But in either event, it was someone who took power through non-democratic means. And then we look at next door to Chad, we look at Sudan, which the same thing essentially occurred, but it was a different dynamic. And then we take a look over at the Niger Republic, and there was an attempted coup. And then we look next door to Mali, where there was another coup. Then we look at Burkina Faso, which is connected to these countries that I'm speaking about. And then we look at Guinea. And these nations all traditionally had routes that connected all of them to each other, so they're very connected. So we go back to the original source, and we have to ask, what was the point in destroying and destabilizing the country in North Africa? Well, you might say getting rid of one person, but if there's not a plan to rebuild that nation after you destroy it, you're creating problems for everybody else. And the thing is that if you're thousands of miles away from the problem that you created, you have to remember that those problems that you created in the environment that you created them in are still going to reside in that environment in which you created them in. They're going to have repercussions. Now, we have to also put some blame on some of the African leaders, because we have to remember that You cannot defeat a coup with military means. The only way to defeat a coup is with good governance. So, for example, let's take a look at Mali. All right. Mali, some say the government was corrupt. Some say that the government practiced a form of governance that didn't actually reach and touch the people. And if we assume those things are true, we look at the fact that when there was a coup, when there was the ousted leader, some of the people actually celebrated in the streets. Now, like I said, the cure to prevent a coup is good governance. So anytime you have good governance, if you try to oust that leader or say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and get rid of this particular leader, if the people's lives are good and they know that this governor, this senator, this democratically elected president has made their lives markedly better, they're going to stand up in the streets and prevent you from destabilizing their nation. They're going to say, are you crazy? Because they remember for a long time things weren't good. This president came along and made things good, and the only thing you can do or think to do is get rid of this president. For who? A bunch of shadowy military figures that we don't really know what they're going to implement. That's how you prevent a coup from happening. If you're a good leader, you shouldn't fear a coup.
Cool. Listen, we got two Niger back here. Two Niger, go ahead.
Hi, Ebube, and thanks for having me, Diners. Ebube, I think, spoken like a very son of the East, saying that good governance is how you get rid of coups. Have you heard of Sierra Leone, that Nigeria got rid of their military this in coup? I believe that the African continent needs to destroy.
Hold on, Niger. When was this?
In 1990 something, 94, 5 or so.
During the Civil War. The
Civil War, and there was a coup. Immediately, Abacha was there, and within weeks they got rid of the coup plotters. So you can deter, and I think there was one that almost occurred in Gambia, and they stopped it too. And Guinea-Bissau, the failed coup, the ECOWAS sent some military expedition there to buck up the government, in other words. And I believe they should have done more with Mali and all the other countries, is because obviously ECOWAS is relatively weak, which is basically Nigeria right now. So they couldn't intervene. Because you can't just keep having young people come in whenever they like. When you say good government, what you don't understand is it doesn't matter, because whenever you have a democratic government, there's one policy that they will pass that will lead people to come out on the street. And before you know it, there's going to be a military regime. And then what are you going to do? And sometimes even when the civilian regime is popular, the military regime will just kill people. It's very simple. To say good governance is what prevents military, it's not generally accurate. You have to have institutions that is ready to put them down, because there are always douchebags out there that just are ambitious or are being bribed for whatever reason. We want to go and destabilize the whole nation or a whole region. So I believe that ECOWAS should act, they should be more robust, and they have to put down this type of things, even on the continent. The last phase should be preventing internal conflicts too. Because if we don't have stability, the madness is going to continue. Can you imagine a leader that is running a country on a continent that there are coups often? Decision making will be affected. It breeds bad government, and everybody's running their country as if it's about to fall apart all the time. And you wonder why our continent is unstable. There has to be rules somewhere, and somebody needs to draw a line. And I think what they did to this in Mali was the minimum they could have done, because they spoke to the leader and they had an agreement, and the leader just went and reneged on the agreement and stayed 5 years as if this is a joke. There is 400 and something million people behind. Mali is just 20 million. There's 400 and something million Africans. 200 and something of them are in Nigeria. Do you want a military coup to occur in Nigeria because people feel like, all systems are failing? Nobody needs that kind of instability. If there is a military regime today, I grew up in Nigeria. You know that. I don't know whether you grew up in Nigeria. I grew up in Nigeria in the early 80s. By the time Babangida left office, military regime, our country was in tatters. Then Abacha came and did his own. Then before we returned back to a democratic system. that we are trying to patch up and bring back together. Africa should move away from that instability and start building an advanced democratic system that is even more advanced than what they have in the West. Just like we built an advanced banking system, there's no reason why we can't think in a different direction. We have been conditioned to think, the way we have been limited in our thinking. And I think it's a good thing that we have rules, and it should extend all over the continent.
All right, I'm going to address a few things that you said. You may have misheard what I said. What I said is that in order to prevent a coup, I think you're talking about, all right, you have to understand there's a timeline, right? And you're talking about after a coup has occurred. I'm talking about before. Now, what prevents a coup is good governance. That's just a fact. Now, if you're governing your people good, and part of the problem that we have in Africa is that democracy, to an extent, has gotten a bad name. And the reason that democracy has gotten a bad name is because certain people who had ill intentions for their countries forced their way into power through a democratic system because democratic systems were in vogue. But these people had no intentions of developing the nations or doing anything for the nation. It was really for themselves. Really, it was for self-enrichment through a democratic system. So now these people who had no intentions of helping their nations but took power in a democratic dispensation now sought to enrich themselves and their cronies. And so by doing that under the guise of being a democratically elected government, they just were essentially kleptocrats. They were thieves. They were saying, Africa is rich. Let's make sure me and my friends get rich. And because I'm the president and I was democratically elected through a flawed election, you can't get rid of me for the next 4 years. And of course, I'm going to perpetuate myself into power. So I'm going to have another 4 years. That's not democracy. What that is, hey, let me just finish. So you understand me fully, because if you cut me off, you're not going to understand. So now what happened is that what we call democracy in Africa really wasn't democracy. It was almost a rehearsal of democracy, where you would have these groups having these elections that didn't necessarily correspond with the will of the people. If you understand Nigeria, and I believe you're old enough to remember, you remember Abiola and the fact that some say he won the election, but he didn't become president. That's not how democracy works. So now you have these people who operated within the confines of a quote unquote democracy. And these African people realize that our lives are getting worse and worse. We have all this wealth. How come it's not reaching the lives of the everyday citizens? Therefore, democracy isn't working for us. What they experienced as democracy, what they saw as a democracy. It's almost like somebody who's in a bad marriage. If your marriage is terrible and you're with a woman who's insufferable, or you're with a man who's likewise insufferable, and then you leave and then somebody brings up marriage, you're like, yeah, marriage doesn't work. Marriage is the worst thing ever. You're really speaking from your experience and your understanding of what marriage is, which is a bastardized experience, because that's not truly what marriage is supposed to be. That's how democracy has been in Africa. If you remember, Fela Kuti had a song called Teacher, Don't Teach Me No Nonsense, where he essentially said that if the Europeans are going to bring me this system and teach us democracy, and they see that this thing that they taught us isn't working, maybe they didn't teach us the right type of democracy, because the democracy that they have in their place is very different than the democracy we have in our place. So now the cure to that is good governance, because if the government is for the people, represents the will of the people, and is delivering the dividends of democracy to the people aren't going to line the streets and cheer when that democratic government is overthrown. If you think back in Nigeria, many of the coups that happened in Nigeria had public support. Well, many of the coups that toppled democratic governments. If you remember when Shagari's government was toppled, people celebrated. I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember. People celebrated
That's
that.
what I'm telling you.
Well, let me just finish. People celebrated the toppling of a democratically elected president because they saw that government was very wasteful and corrupt. Now, that government wasn't necessarily democratic if you looked under the hood. But if you just looked at it in name only, you would say, yes, this is a democratically elected government. And you see democracy in Africa simply doesn't work because take a look at it. Once again, it's like being in a bad marriage. That's not what marriage is. That's what your marriage is. It doesn't mean that's how marriage is supposed to be. So now if the democracy isn't good, that just means that democracy that's being practiced in the name of democracy isn't good. Therefore, in order to prevent a coup or a military toppling a democracy, that's the only type of coup I'm referring to here, not a coup where the military they call it an in-house coup where the military takes power from another military official. No, what I'm talking about is what's been happening recently in West Africa, where you have democratically elected leaders who are getting toppled by military regimes, and the people are celebrating. The people are celebrating because many of those governments are viewed as corrupt. And when your government is viewed as corrupt, you get very little sympathy from the masses when your government is toppled and the president, who's seen as the head of that government, is put in jail. Now, when you provide good governance to the people, and then they see these rogue military figures trying to topple this, and the people's lives are markedly improved, they're going to fight whoever is trying to disturb the progress that they've made. So in order as a president to prevent coups, military coups from toppling democratically elected government, what you have to do is you have to provide good governance to the people. That's where you start. Now, if you fail to provide good governance, and so the military decides, hey, look at these thieves that are in office, it would be better to get rid of them and instill discipline. When it reaches that level, what's going to happen is that nobody is going to have sympathy for you when the military topples your government. In fact, they're going to celebrate. That's the problem. So now after that happens is where we're talking now. So what you're talking about is afterwards, not before. I'm talking about before a coup. This is preventive medicine. In order to prevent a coup, the best thing that a democratically elected government can do is actually heed the will of the people and make sure that the nation is progressing. If you fail to do that, you leave yourself open to a coup. You have the floor.
The thing is, you see, what you don't understand about democracy is that there is always ups and downs. No matter how well you govern, there are people that will be marginalized by any decision you make. There are people that will literally die. And when the military regime comes in, they will always be there to jubilate, and because they've seen something shiny and new. They will always do that. The recent example is Egypt. They just elected a president a year. Then the next year, they were protesting against the president, and the military regime came in, shot a lot of people, took everything, and then he made himself the civilian president. He's the president now. And when you use the term bad marriage, the trick is marriage. And when you use the term democracy, bad democracy is not democracy, it's democracy. Not all democracies are running perfectly all the time. Trump was around once when a lot of people were not happy, and Biden, a lot of people are still not happy, but it's still a democracy. Then you have to understand, when we talk about as if we set a different standard for our own people than the whole world is doing, you cannot say, okay, oh, the elites are making themselves rich in our country. The elites are making themselves rich in Western countries too. The people that own as much as half of the population of the US today can fit in one tiny bus. They're not up to 10 even. So how can you say, oh, because our people are enriching themselves, so suddenly, oh, the democracy has to be toppled?
No, that's not what I said. No, Tunaja, you're missing my point. That's not what I said. I think we might be getting a little off topic, but I use words for a particular reason. You have to focus on the words that I'm using. What I said is this, is that if you're democratically elected and you don't provide good governance to the people, you're allowing and you're setting yourself up to be vulnerable for a military takeover. That's just the fact, whether you agree with it or not. So let me just finish. Let me just finish. Now the thing is, just listen. Now the thing is this: a good democracy is based on good and strong democratic institutions. A good and strong democratic institution, for example, is the electoral system, right? A good electoral system in a true democratic setting, the president can't just pick somebody, rig the election, and put them in power and say, well, this person was elected in a democratic setting. That's not democracy, right? That's just not what it is. So in America, for example, the system works. No matter how much the last president, Donald Trump, wanted to stay in power, if the will of the people across the nation said we're going to vote for your opposition, that's the end of it. No matter how powerful you are as the president, you have to accept those results. So now it's about the strength of the institution. I think you're missing what I'm saying, but if you listen to this on the playback and you listen to it with an empty mind, you'll understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that democracy is based on democracy is based on strong institutions. Hey, but tonight we can't talk over each other because we're going to miss. We're going to miss each other's points. But democracy is based on strong institutions. You have the floor.
Can I say something, brother? Dynasty.
Tonight has the floor, and then Garnett, you can go after that.
Just reply to that.
Go ahead.
You see, what I'm arguing for is, even if you have bad governance, the military shouldn't come in, because from the point of view of stability, it's madness for us to say, you know what, because this president that was just elected was a total nut, he didn't do his job very well, the military should come in and put another regime in place. They are breaking the law to uphold the law. That's law of the jungle. You can't have that. You have to have rules that says, military, whatever happens, you stay on your lane, and the democratic system will fix it, whatever they want to fix. And if you want to fix anything, don't take over the government. You go behind the scenes and make your will known, so that if you have to do that, if you have to arrest somebody for doing something that you don't like, you arrest them and reinstate a democratic government or a democratic transition government. Military should never be taken over from governments, because the world, even China has realized that. Russia has realized that. Almost all democracies have figured that one out. Even Kim Jong-il is not even a military regime, for crying out loud. We can't be having all this instability as if we are in the 50s, 60s, and it makes us look bad. It really doesn't say we are mature in any way. We can't even follow a simple rule like keep the military in their barracks, let the democratic system function. Even if it doesn't function very well, like the one I really don't like is when governments come in office and they want to extend their term, their ability to run for a third term or even a fourth term. I consider that a form of coup, and I believe that the international institutions should pay attention to that, because when civilian regimes can do that, use their power the power they get from the office to extend their term in office, it's a form of coup. You can't just allow that to happen. That is kind of stuff that leads the military to start thinking that, okay, we have to intervene. And you see, that can lead to some serious righteous indignation, and then you have coups like the one that happened, I think in Guinea or one of the other countries. The guy wanted to extend his term in office, and it led to a coup. If they take care of that and put a rule, no military regime, stay in your barracks, we will take care of any democratic government that does something that breaks the law out of the norm. Because if you look at it, our people can do their job. All they need is security, need stability, and let the continent flourish. It's very simple principle. That's what they are doing in Europe.
You know, I think we're saying the same. I think we're saying the same thing. Of course, you know, I'm not.
You all are. I was going to say y'all are. It sounds like you guys are saying the same thing.
No, but he seems to be justifying
let's go. And one second, guys, hit the like button again. Please hit the like button as you come to the chat room. Hit the like button, and shout out to Sissy to say 99. No democracy, just selected men for faceless men, giving semblance of being elected by the people. Go ahead, Garnett.
Actually, that comment by the sister right there, CSay 99, that's right on time. Democracy will never work in Africa. Now, I'm a Black American like Dynasty, and I'm very in tune with African politics. Is something I consider a hobby of mine for over a decade now. So just hear me out. Democracy will never work in Africa, and I'm gonna tell you why. You have a problem in Africa with tribalism, right? We don't have to go into that. We all understand that. The reason why democracy will never work in Africa is because every election, tribalism is injected into the atmosphere, you know, based on who's going to be the next president. You see it in Ethiopia. See, people don't understand what was going on in Ethiopia. I'm glad it's kind of died down and that the dam is flowing now. But Meles Zenawi, he was a Tigray person, right? The United States and the West, they look at the people in Africa, the different governments, different countries, and they say, okay, let's take a one tribe and kind of elevate them. Usually it's a tribe that has a glorious past, well-known past, and they fall on hard times and they pull them back. You see this a lot in Nigeria as well. Nigeria, specifically, if you think about ECOMOG, that was probably the most efficient episode in Nigerians' military history, where they were able to go and help establish some semblance of civility and stability, right? But they can't do it in their own country. That happens all across Africa, because you look at China. China has over 1 billion people, but they're ruled by like 80,000 people. Their party is only like 88,000 people, less than 90,000 people. Africa is about on the same lines. You got 1 billion black people. You're about to have 1 billion black people on the same continent, the same geographical space. And you're trying to have democratic elections in several, in 50 of those countries, 40 of them, if you talk about Black Africa. That, if you think about it, that's a pipe dream. That's you're inviting chaos. It needs to be one system, and the only way you can have one system is if you have dictatorships. I'm in favor of dictatorships, but the dictators can't be, like Kagame, who I actually like, but he was educated at the American War College in Leavenworth, Kansas. How you have to have dictators brought up in an African system. I don't know what it is. I'm no expert, but this whole thing about democracy is a pipe dream, and you're only digging a deeper hole, because democracy, whoever has the most money in the democracy is who's going to win. Whoever can offer the people the most, whoever can appease the masses the most, that's who's going to win. So democracy, really think about it. You got, you're intelligent brothers, but come on, like democracy. And
you're
focused on Nigeria. You both are from Nigeria, I believe, right? See, you have to think about. See, I think that's why the Black Americans, and I'm not tooting my own horn.
Unite the continent.
Now I can tell you this: it's probably not going to come from Africans. It's probably going to come just like Pan-Africanism didn't come from the continent. It came from those blacks in the diaspora. There's a reason for that, because we have a different concept. Look at how many Africans view. I know that there are a lot of Africans that are for and supporting Putin and what's going on in Russia, but there are way more Africans that don't understand what's going on. But what's going on in Russia right now, and what's always going on in Russia, if you pay attention, is the exact blueprint that Africa should be following. When you talk about territorial expansion, he's not doing like the United States and going across seas. All he's doing is his periphery. He's gobbling up the space that is historically his. Absolutely. Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine.
You're correct. You're right.
Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine they're not European. They are the same people. They're from the Kiev and Rus.
Yeah, but how do you unite the continent without massive bloodshed? That is the question I'm asking.
You have to have bloodshed. You have to have bloodshed. You have to be organized. No, listen. Yeah, it has to be organized. Listen, it has to be organized. When I say bloodshed,
we might be getting a little off topic, but the thing is, you did make some salient points. However, we might be getting a little off topic. When it comes to Africa, you made some good points that I want to touch on. Now, this brings it back to the point of what I was speaking earlier. If you're going to have a democracy, you need a good democracy. I'm always of the opinion that Africa, not every culture, and you have to remember Africa, and Africa is one of the oldest places in the world. And so you have to understand Africa first, right? Africa was divided by culture. There weren't the nations that we have today. Africa was divided by culture. And that is the fundamental organizational unit of the African. Today we call it tribe. But if you're from a similar culture, you speak a similar language, you handle problems the same way. And this is like the book that I'm writing. The book I'm writing is called Culture. Now, all culture is personal, and culture is also at a group level. Now, when it comes to culture, as Neely Fuller explains, it's just what you do every day, right? So if you wake up, you do this, you eat this, you go to the gym, you do that, that's your personal culture. Now, whatever people that you identify with, whatever they do every day, that's also your culture, right? So now, when you look at Africa, you have to understand that Africa is actually segmented by culture. We might foolishly call it tribe, but a tribe is actually small. Some of these cultures are in the tens of millions, right? So we wouldn't call France a tribe, we'd call it a culture. And we wouldn't expect a Frenchman to act like a Russian. We'd understand that the Frenchman is different than the Russian, and we'd respect those differences. When it comes to Africa, people don't respect those differences. They say, oh, you're a Frenchman, you're a Spanish person, and you're a Russian. Well, I think you guys all need to eat Spanish rice because that's unity. No, that's not unity. That's ignoring the cultural realities on ground. And so sometimes people oversimplify and say, well, Africa just needs to be one or this and that. But that's an oversimplification because the African experience has never been actually looked into and understood for what it is. So unfortunately, people make statements like Africa needs to do this and do that and do this. No, what we have to do is we have to understand that Africa, unfortunately, in the countries that we have the Africans finding themselves in, they weren't necessarily reflective of the certain cultures that the Africans represent. So we have to understand that first. Now, in understanding that, we see that some cultures, so for example, the culture that I come from is a culture in Southeast Nigeria. It's a culture that was started over 1,000 years ago, And one of the first things we did is we outlawed kings and we outlawed slaves in 900 AD. Just think about that. Now, there were some African cultures who would go to war with their neighbors. The culture I came from, we looked down on attacking our neighbors because we believed that we couldn't force our culture onto another culture. And we never did that historically. We always lived at peace with our neighbors for over 1,000 years. Now, you look at some other...
Not to cut you off, Ebube. No, just because you're on that point, I want to ask you a question on that point.
Let me finish, and then you can get it.
Go ahead.
So now you look at some other cultures, and some other cultures said, well, we domesticated the horse. We have cavalries, and we also have rifles, and we also created this body armor, which makes us almost impenetrable, which means we can take over and tax our neighbors. And that's what they did. That's their culture. So now you might say democracy might work for
self-preservation. Self-preservation is their culture. I thought that was the first law of nature.
No, that's
self-preservation, defense.
Yeah, it is, but you're missing my point. My point is this, you have to understand it at a very complex level. Stay with me here because you're going to get this when I'm done. Certain cultures in Africa banned slavery 1,000 years ago. Certain cultures in Africa were taking over their neighbors. So now you have to understand that if we put these two cultures in the same country, there's going to be different results. Some cultures might be pro-democracy and say, well, we've had a system that's been very democratic this whole time. Some cultures might say, well, we prefer a strong man because we've had kings historically in our culture. So you have to ask about the culture first before we get into talking about what Africa should do in this direction. Is that
right? Like the Chinese asked the Uyghurs, like the Chinese asked the Uyghurs, like the Chinese asked the Uyghurs what their culture is.
You got it next. Hey, Garnett, go ahead.
I understand. I was going to say, you're right. Exactly like the Chinese asked the Uyghurs, about Allah and what their feelings are. They don't care about that. I understand what you're saying, and what you're saying is valid now, but we have to think about, we have to be forward thinking and forward looking. Okay, culture, that's fine. Culture is just behavior. Like you say, it's what you do every day. And a group of people, what they do every day relative to how close they are, where they are geographically and all of that. But what I'm saying is this. What does that have to do with the defense of the continent, the defense of the race? That has nothing to do with it.
Let me answer that question. You're saying, what does that have to do with the defense of the culture and the defense of the
continent and the race? What does that have to do with the defense of the black race and the continent in our future?
Just pause for a second. Just pause and just, let's speak to understand each other as opposed to speaking to say different things. I get what you're saying. What does that have to do with the defense of the culture, the continent, and the race? Those are three different questions. I'm going to address them all. Now, every culture is going to defend its culture because that's what cultures do. The first law of being alive, existence, is self-preservation. So every culture fights to keep and perpetuate its culture. So that's the culture. The continent. Now we have to ask ourselves, within these different cultures, what is the thing that we share? So, for example, you look at certain African nations that were able to stand independent. They were able to stand independent by saying, look, we were fighting each other before these Europeans came, but we realized that they've come with advanced weaponry, and now we have to acquire that same advanced weaponry that made the Europeans so successful. And I covered this in my documentary. I'm not
now,
sure
which African countries were independent?
Garnett. Well, you look at Ethiopia, but Garnett,
Ethiopia was not independent when they were attacked by Italy. They split off Eritrea.
Garnett,
go ahead.
You're talking.
Try to get to the point a bit faster. That would help.
No, I understand what he's saying. I just don't want to lose the when you say something.
Garnett, just listen. Just mute yourself for a second and listen. If you don't have self-control, because it'll get to a point where I'm going to look at talking to you as something not worthwhile. And I don't want to do that. I want to respect you. So respect yourself so I can respect you. Otherwise, you lose my respect and it'll be very difficult to get it back.
Understood, brother.
So now what I was saying is that certain nations that had different cultures within their nation, they banded together and said, even though we have different cultures, even though we're different people, even though we have different languages, we have one objective. And that objective is to not be dominated by Europeans. So let's make sure that doesn't happen. So now in order to defend yourself, your culture, we covered that. In order to defend what you've deemed to be your nation, whatever cultures have banded together, you now say, where do we have similar lines of agreement? We don't want to be dominated by the Europeans. Great, let's fight them together. Now, when you talk about defending the continent, you have to take all of these different nations and say, okay, what do we all agree on, despite our differences? What do we all agree on? We all agree that we don't want to be dominated. Okay, we have to create a system, and a system is nothing but people acting in concert through thought, speech, and or action towards a shared objective. It's called having a code of conduct. And when you have a code of conduct, you're going to be the strongest people on earth because you have many people independently acting in concert with each other in order to reach an objective. It's almost like, let's say you have a job and you have people at the job that don't like you. And let's say everybody wants to prevent you from reaching that next level when you're working at a job. This is personally why I work for myself. But let's say you find yourself in that type of situation. You're going to have people who are working in concert against you behind the scenes to create a system against you. And you're wondering why things aren't going your way. And you don't realize a system has been set up against you. A system is the strongest form of resistance. So how do you defend a continent? You defend a continent with a system. So hopefully you're able to soak that. But to Niger, I know you had something to chime in on. I really want to hear what you have to say. What do you have on this topic?
Yeah, this is the reason why I advocated having an advanced form of democracy, because we can theorize about how we want to do things. Sooner or later, we have to hit the pavement, because when people talk about having one government in Africa, that puts knocks head together, you are talking about a situation whereby you are going to decimate a lot of lives. And given the situation Africa is in right now, when everybody's trying to take advantage of us, you are not setting us up to win. That war is going to devolve to something else and leave us even more vulnerable. So the way to go is to build on what we have now and run with the democracy. Because we are so different on the continent, the only logical thing to do is to allow each group to be able to express themselves in whatever system that is put in place, and it's going to take something even more advanced than whatever has been put in the West.
And that's when the West steps in. That's when the white people step in. Let me speak Black America. That's when the white folks step in, and they offer, oh, you want to elevate your culture, your ethnic group? Here's a grant. Here's this. Here's that. And that's where you get the issues on the continent. I mean, I don't know how more simply to put it. All of this, I'm for Biafra, but only if and when we unite the continent, then you can have your Biafra or whatever. You want to be the Azawad for the Tuareg or whatever.
What I'm saying. I agree with what you're saying. I'm saying that everybody should be able to express themselves.
Before we get too off topic, hey, Muchi T, what do you have to contribute to the topic for tonight?
Yeah, a few things, man. So first off, I do agree with you about the democracy. We don't have true democracy in Africa, right? You talk about the coups. What happens in most African countries is the leaders the military is not apolitical. The leaders, they corrupt the military officials to be in bed with them to suppress opposition, right? And then only cry wolf when the same military turns around and does a coup on them. But if they could keep all the institutions separate and independent, which they don't do, because you look even at the elections, somebody was talking about Abiola from Southern Africa, we all have the same thing. When the elections happen, if the incumbent loses, they're trying to manipulate the electoral commission to manipulate the results. And therefore the legitimate winner does not come into office. You know, something interesting is going on in Ukraine right now. I said in the last time we talked last week, I said this is none of our business. But so you see, on one hand, I don't like how they are treating our people, right? But right now we are observing Ukrainians, men that are crossing the border from Poland and all over the place, going to fight for their country. I tell you right now, there is not many African countries faced with this situation where we will voluntarily go back to fight for our countries. And the reason is because most of our countries are failing us. The leaders, they only want to have money in their pocket. And all these things about tribal, I'll finish with tribalism. You know, even when you look at tribalism, most Africans, we are good people. We don't put tribe first. But what happens with these leaders is they try to give the top positions to people from a favored region, right? And then you get the tax dollars that go to the federal government that are supposed to develop the country in an even way. They are concentrated in one region. So what ends up happening is you have one area of the country that's more developed than other countries. Then of course, all the other tribes are not going to be happy about this. So, you know, really, our leadership, the guys, if we have people that are patriotic, and above all, doesn't matter how educated you are. If you are not a good person, if you are a criminal, if you are a thief, you should not be in politics. This is the problem. We have too many educated people that are not patriotic, that are criminals, that make deals with foreign governments, that are not beneficial to the local people, that keep selling raw materials.
Usually, not to interrupt, but it's usually those educated in the West. They
it doesn't matter where they're educated, my brother. No. It's not about where they're educated.
Continue with your point.
It is. If most African brothers that I know, and I'm in Dallas, when they go ahead. I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah, go ahead, Moochie.
Okay. I'll finish. So it's not about, forget about where they're educated. Your values should not depend on where you are educated. Your values should be about, if you are a nationalist, a patriotic person, right? If you're a good person, somebody of goodwill, when you get into government, you don't go into government to steal. So that is not dependent on your tribe. That is not dependent on where you go to school or your religion. Look at China right now. China, the president of China today or yesterday, he already has said China needs to be self-sufficient in grains. Why? Because most of the grains are coming from Russia and Ukraine, right? So he's already thinking about his country, like we don't want to be dependent on other countries to feed our people. But our leaders don't think like that. But anyway, that's all I have to say for now.
I'm gonna build off the point that you just made, because you made a very salient point, and these are the type of points that we need to actually hear and understand. What Moochie just said, it's something that's very important. And then we'll get to the super chat in just a second. But what Moochie said was very important. He said that other leaders from Don, is there any way to bring it back up? Anyway, I think I'll be able to see it. But what Moochie said is that with other nations, their leaders are focused on leading the nation. They're focused on building a nation because they understand that we compete internationally as a nation of people, not our individual cultures. That's what a good leader does. A bad leader becomes a sectarian leader, and will now become an ethnic leader and say, well, I'm going to dictate and direct all the resources of my particular region. Therefore, you've created and made yourself into a tribalistic president. So now the other tribes or the other cultures are only right to say, well, we need our guy there because I see how you're playing the game. You're not playing the game in order to make the nation stronger. You're playing the game to first make yourself stronger, your family stronger, your cronies stronger, your friends stronger, and then eventually your tribe and everybody else will get the scraps. By doing that, you create a system that's not really a democracy. You created a system that's essentially where one ethnic group will reign supreme over other ethnic groups. So Muchi, your point is very well taken. You look at China, for example, and you look at their leader. Their leader is saying, you know, the Ukraine is the breadbasket of many countries. Much of the world's wheat comes from that area. And he's saying that, hey, look, we depend so much on this nation as a nation. What we need to do is we need to become self-sufficient as a nation. He's not talking about his tribe or his group or his anything of that nature. What he's talking about is his people as a nation. Let me jump on this super chat. It says, accepting a Biafran state at any point of history is the worst idea for Nigeria long-term success. That will further perpetuate the idea of breaking apart Nigeria for each tribe who wants their own state while completely losing their focus on unity. And that's another thing. When you're dealing with Nigeria, you have to remember that Nigeria, unlike many other nations, isn't a nation that shares a common culture. Nigeria is a nation of nations. Therefore, the concept of unity is important. And if you've checked into my channel and checked in to Come Fly With Me, what I released today, I talk about that. But you had the Bonu Kingdom Empire, which came first in what later became Nigeria, and then the Hausa states, and then the Kingdom of Unri, and then the Benin Empire, and then the Oyo Empire. We had very established, very insular nations that had their own issues, their own problems, their own culture. And then you put them together. These are separate nations that if we don't come together with a culture of unity and a culture of actually stepping to the world as a nation and putting national interest above tribal interest, such a nation will never work. And it's bound to break up. And if it breaks up, that means that doesn't bode well for the rest of Africa, because many of the nations in Africa were created not along lines of culture, but along lines of European desires. Therefore, if we don't understand how to get together and unify and move in a way where all of the parts of every nation and every culture is brought along in a proper way, you're always going to have dissatisfaction with that particular nation. So, King Nick, you bring up a good point that if we don't deal with unity at a true level and say we really need to make sure that unity is at the forefront of everything we do as a nation, and we need to move and act as a nation, well, then many of the nations in Africa are doomed to have the same fate as a nation like Sudan, where the two cultures, one culture was more focused on oppressing the other culture. Eventually, that nation was partitioned by culture. So unity is important. So, Muchi, you bring up an extremely good point. I hope everybody was tuning in and understanding that lesson. But with African leaders, what we need is nationalistic leaders, not tribalistic leaders. And Dynas, you notice that is very good, right? Dynas, you notice that since we haven't said certain words, the signal has been rather clear.
Right. Hey, one second, right? Garnett, I'm gonna keep you on mute because there's feedback coming from you. So I'm gonna keep you on mute. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, and so Tunaja, it seems like you had something to say. You have the floor.
Yeah. Regarding this in different groups being in the country, the way I look at it is that if you want to deal with such issues, obviously you don't marginalize people, and the nation has to have a common goal. And I believe that we have to strengthen our democratic systems because Africa is too diverse. And if you want to play a blinder that they don't see coming, they can try to bribe all the people they want. We are as weak as our weakest link. If the Igbos don't feel like they are participating in the system, they are a weak link on the continent. If one other group feels, if you have to, because if you look at in Europe now, like Switzerland, they operate a very, very sophisticated democratic system. Most of the things they do is decided by these resolutions, these referendums, and they have multiple presidents every time they go for elections. So Africa should devise something uniquely African that caters to the complexity of the continent. And if we do that, we can foster stability that cannot be shaken, because the people themselves will feel that they can participate in the system. And every time we think about these things, we seem to be fighting old battles. You know, Nigerians love this Rollins because of what he did. Some people love China because they have an authoritarian government. But we have to look at what we have on the continent.
You seem like you're echoing a little bit. You seem like you're echoing. Do you have the playback on? Is it on somewhere else?
No,
if you do, please shut it off.
No, I don't. I think it's some other person that just on their.
I just muted myself.
Yeah. So we have to have a system that engages everybody, and you are one of those the thought leaders. You should be proposing a transparent system. Like, I don't think, somebody tell me why the citizens cannot know where the funds are going to, why they cannot track what is going on in the governor's account, why they cannot track what's going on in the minister's account. Apart from defense, there's no reason why on the continent and in Nigeria particularly, we can't track the funds. We can be able to see it on our mobile app, on the government website, and see this money is going to this contractor, this money is going to this staff, this thing. We should be able to see it just as the fraud agency should be able to track it. So if we foster a transparent system, you can see a situation whereby trust will build within the government and between the people and their government, and you foster a more robust system. And Igbo man will see, oh, my money is not going to waste. It's doing what I expect it to do. And also, you start, the solutions are all there. I think what we just need is to expand some of our scope, because we seem to be repeating the same thing over and over again. And I've wrestled with this for such a long time. And all I found is that, come on, there was a time when, car theft was all over the place. But what killed it was because GPS trackers came on stream, and CCTV put the nail on the coffin. Because it's still a car now. Everybody follows you. And if you can track every money that is being spent by every government official, and you make it so that before they even get the money in the account, what it's going to be used for has already been agreed. All they have to do is authorize, go to this one, go to this one. They don't have any room to pay to any bribe nonsense or siphon it to the account. Because the moment it happens, ping, the bank will show it to everybody. If you do that, you will disincentivize the ones that are looking for money, that are the corrupt ones, from running for office.
Exactly. And you know what you're discussing? What you're discussing is a strong system. And this is what I've been saying all along, is that a true democracy is built on strong systems where, for example, you can't just take, and you understand, if you ever read any of the court cases from some of these ex-governors, essentially what some of them have been accused of is taking the government allocation and directly embezzling that into their private accounts. You know how crazy that is? It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. But because there's no strong oversight, someone can literally take government money and put it into the account with their name on it, and then show up in court saying that I'm being witch hunted. So I wholly agree with you that what we need are strong institutions, not just strong men. However, it takes people to create, it takes the will of the people to create those strong institutions.
Can I say something real quick? I'm gonna let you finish.
The floor is yours, and then Garnett has it after you. I see he got the finger up and a frustrated look on his face. So Shirley, you have it, then Garnett, you have it after Shirley.
I want to tie this back to African Americans, especially those of us who are descendants of slaves. I know there's a lot of talk in the chat room when we talk about this administration and Africa. I'm a learning student in this room, and a lot of people say, why am I quiet? Because we all here to learn, and I'm learning so much from you gentlemen. I thank you for having me to be part of this panel. I really just am here to absorb and be a sponge as we talk about the African nations. One thing that I never did understand is, why has not America built an alliance when it comes to understanding resources and trades and treaties with Africa, as the way China has, as the way Great Britain has taken advantage, and even the Ukraine situation? Why do we not see a democracy of a relationship between Africa and America? And the African American leaders have never addressed the issue of, these people have resources, we can work with them, and we can build a suit, because the system has already designed not to work in those of us who are descendants of slaves and who are foundational people going back to further back than 1619. But we talk about where we are today as a people that want to work with Africa, but yet Africa, when they come here, we still have our differences, especially those who come from Nigeria.
Well, I'll answer that, and then Garnett, can I interrupt you slightly to answer the question, and then it goes to you? Okay. To answer your question, you have to understand that to an extent there are several Americas. America's melting pot of several different cultures. Now, historically, the people who, the African Americans who this landmass and have been here for quite some time.
It was kind of going in and out, but just continue. Go ahead.
How are we now? Give me the thumbs up if we're okay. All right. So let me hear my next question before there's some disruption. But historically, there have been some interests that always want to keep Africans of America away from Africans on the continent. And the government of this nation, America, there's been a lot of interaction with Africa in certain ways. If you look at Obama and what he did with Africa, he basically put bases on the continent. That's essentially been the extent of the foreign relations. It's always been militaristic in that America wants to have boots on the ground, thousands of troops on the ground, and that's eventually which they see the foreign relations, the interaction with Africa. If it ever hits the fan, they want to be the first there to.
Yeah, Ebube, you go in and out.
Yeah, no, you're good. I think it's like when everybody's muted, he's like when somebody's open, he sounds better. He's clear. Like right now, he's clear.
Okay, so mute yourself.
What about now? Am I okay?
Go ahead.
So am I okay? All right. So how much of that? All right. So basically, the interaction.
You got to start all over.
Okay, I'll start completely all over. All right, the interaction that America has generally had with Africa on a governmental level, not the Africans of America, but the government has typically been militaristic, meaning that they want to put their military there just in case it ever hits the fan. They want to be the first on ground to ensure that foreign policy of this nation is enforced, just in case the political order breaks down. So it's always been militaristic. Now, we have to understand that historically, there have always been institutions and interests that want to ensure that Africans of America don't necessarily have a proper connection with the Africans on the continent. And this goes back for quite some time. And so Africans of America now have the ability to turn on YouTube, turn on the internet, and actually see their brothers and sisters in Africa. And this is one thing I do want to address with the rift. It seems like it's gotten more pronounced recently. With there being a rift between Africans of the continent and Africans of America. And I look at it like this, and this is a metaphor that everybody can understand. Let's say that Africans are represented by one person and African Americans are represented by one person. And both of these people have been falsely imprisoned in a prison system. And then they come to the mess hall, to the lunchroom, and maybe one group has better jokes on that person. They go in and then they say, well, I beat you at the lunchroom. I made fun of you and I won the roast battle for that day. But at the end of the 30 minutes of our lunch, we both go back to our cells where we've been falsely imprisoned. And you see at the end of the day, we're not really building anything. We're not really understanding anything. And we're not really moving anything because we're not actually having the bravery to challenge the person that falsely imprisoned us. So that's really where it needs to swing to.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand where you're coming from as far as a perspective of how one culture of people are being discriminated versus another culture of people who are cousins or family that are being discriminated. I'm talking about from a money perspective, a commodity perspective. If we have America, which is one of the strongest countries in the world, that's how we look at ourselves, okay? And we see Africa. And why is America not building an alliance when it comes to commodities, when it comes to food, water, shelter, diamonds, and golds? Why are we not utilizing the continent the same way that China is?
They are. They are using it. I'm not trying to cut you off, brother Ebube, but just to answer Sister Shirley's question, yeah, I mean, they are. They've been doing it. I mean, Obama's, his mentors, the Big New Brzezinski, he said way back, in the 60s and 70s that, their main objective was to keep the blacks who were here in America, who were revolting at the time, from connecting with the newly freed African independent nations. So there's a reason for that. The reason is and it's the same reason why democracy will never work on the continent. Let me put it plain to y'all. Africans do not understand the geopolitical landscape as it regards race. I'm going to say that again. I won't say it like that. Black Americans, we have a history of understanding what white people want, and we've been able to survive living amongst them, knowing that their objective is to completely keep our race, whether it's in Africa, here in the Pacific, in South America, wherever it is, keep us down. Now, the problem, one of the risks that I get, and maybe I'm just a little bit of too much of a thinker, how do Africans, it's just like the Nation of Islam, how do you have all these resources and Nigeria go in ECOMOG in the 90s and help out, in the civil wars in West Africa, and then 2022, we still talking about the same stuff. Brother Ebube, you seem like a very intelligent brother. I've known about Dynasty since he was at University of Georgia, but even I think you went to Christian Brothers too in Sacramento. I used to keep up with all the football stuff, but like y'all got some intelligent brother. Like they say that the Nigerians created the internet. You know what I'm saying? So like, why? Where is the manifestation at the national level? You know where it is? It's because you're looking for democracies. Everybody's looking to do their own thing. When a Chinese student says, I want to go study in the United States, he has to go through the government, and the government says, you're going to bring this back. You're going to do this. This is what you're going to give us. When has a Nigerian ever stole a state secret? And Nigerians are high up in corporate America since forever. Not just singling out the brothers and sisters from Nigeria, but I'm just saying in general, like even the Ethiopians. When has an African of any nation brought anything back from America in terms of a state secret to bring back and say, we're going to take this and develop for the continent? No, we always got to go and partner with it.
Let me just take that one quickly, because I have an idea why that is. You can't steal state secrets when the place you are taking the secret to is not even secure.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It had to start somewhere, because the dude who put the reason why the Chinese have a nuclear weapon.
Garnet,
you're right. I agree with that.
Garnet, let me ask you. You and the sister Shelley was speaking before, right? You African Americans. Do you know about the AGOA Act? AGOA. Do you know?
No.
I'm familiar with it, I'm familiar with it.
Let me just say this. A lot of our people, we don't, seek the facts. Okay, for example, with AGOA, that's Africa Growth Opportunity Act, right? I believe it was George Bush who put that into place. That means that you can set up businesses and enterprises in Africa, and most of those stuff will come into the U.S. market duty-free, okay? So America is represented all over Africa through private enterprises. America doesn't engage in business as a country, okay? So you as individuals, Africans, there are a lot of things that people can do. Now, the other part I just want to address, right, quickly. I
agree with that. I agree with that.
Okay.
Now the sister, but I think what the sister was saying.
Wait, can you wait?
Let me just finish real quick.
Okay. Let me just. Okay. To Niger, you say something that was very profound. You talked about accountability, right, and transparency of government finances. I work in government finances and budgeting here in the US. So in the US, there's something called FOIA. Those who know about government might know that. That's Freedom of Information Act. Okay. Today, anybody can put in a request to government department to get the dollar spent, what was spent on what, for any government department, or almost all government departments. Of course, top secret stuff, you might not get that. But for a state, you can ask, okay, for your human health services, for your transport budget, can you give me all the vendors that you have spent over 100,000 or over $1 million over the past year or over the past 2 years? So the thing, why you keep asking, why can't Africa do this? We have bad leaders, because like Niger was saying, why is this not in place? The leaders are smart. Okay, but they do not put these processes in place. Why? Because they know they'll be caught red-handed.
Too many independent people. Too many independent
No,
nations.
it's not about independent. No.
It is.
It's simple. They are criminals. They are crooks. It's basic. It's
How do you deal with criminals? How do you deal with criminals? How do the Chinese deal with corrupt politicians?
But listen,
by ensuring that, like in Nigeria now, there's going to be an election. You steer the direction of the conversation to transparency and security. Yes, if you do that, then the politicians will have to embrace it because the people will understand that. Because once they do that, you have cut off so many people. Because if the people believe that, okay, if we can track every penny that they are spending, even something even more advanced than the Freedom of Information Act, if they can do that, you find that people will say, yeah, I prefer that. Anybody that is any governor, any president that wants to do that will support that person. You find that the population will support that candidate.
And to Niger,
you know what? Let me just piggyback off of your point really quickly. You and to Niger are saying the same thing, is that, and you guys are essentially saying what I'm saying. At the end of the day, what we need are strong institutions. For example, in America, the reason you can't just transfer money from the state account to your personal account is because that's called embezzlement. You would definitely spend years behind bars because the institutions are strong. It doesn't matter if you're a governor. Doesn't matter if you're a senator. The institutions are strong enough to convict the sitting governor. Well, depending on sovereign immunity and different things like that, but the institutions are strong enough where within the framework of whatever system you set up, the institutions are strong enough to prevent that from happening. And if it prevents that from happening, therefore you can develop as a nation. Now, in regards to Garnett's point, you made an interesting point, and it kind of also dovetails into what I was saying earlier, is that we have to remember that Africa is made up of several cultures. Some cultures are more apt to democracy than others. I brought up a culture that had democracy in 900 AD. They rejected kings and slavery and essentially had democracy. That's the culture that I come from. So to us, democracy is ingrained because until this day, we'll tell you in our language proudly that we don't have kings. Some other cultures, they may have sultans, they may have emirs, they may have kings, they may have those things. So they may lean towards the strong man in politics, if you will. Now, what we may need in Africa is a system that accommodates everybody's traditional. What I personally believe the best system for Africa is something that was set up in a certain country in North Africa, where they essentially legitimize the traditional rulers and put rules and parameters in place around the pre-existing systems of governance in Africa, and said, you know what? If there's a problem, you hold your traditional rulers accountable, because that is more ingrained in your culture. You guys are used to having this traditional ruler. Let's give this traditional ruler more constitutional power within government. Because Africans, we tend to take traditional rulerships more seriously than we do government office. If somebody was elected the Emir of Kano today, they may take that more seriously and treat that with more respect than if they were the governor of Kano. Because the governor is an institution that was recently created. The emir goes back hundreds of years. The sultan goes back hundreds, thousands of years, maybe over 1,000 years. So these are older institutions that people generally have more respect for. So semi-imposing democracy on all of these systems and saying this is a cookie cutter situation, and this all goes back, for example, to that song I talked about by Fela Kuti, where he was essentially saying, don't teach me nonsense. If you see democracy or democracy not working necessarily in Africa, and you guys aren't coming to make sure that the student or the system that you put in place is working properly, maybe you guys have the intention of ever making it work properly, or maybe you guys didn't truly believe that this system could work properly. So, Garnett, in regards to your point, I see things that I agree with. In regards to Nigel's point, you keep saying the same thing about institutions. That's the only way democracy is going to work, if at all. And in regards to Muchi,
I don't agree with that, though.
What is it
not to cut you off, but are you saying, I was going to ask, are you saying that strong institutions it's an XY relationship with democracy? Because I don't agree with
what I was saying. Yes. Well, let me answer that question. Now, what I'm saying is this, is that the current system that everybody's pushing for in Africa is democracy. Now, the type of democracy that we practice in Africa isn't necessarily democracy. It's a quasi-democracy where, for example, if people might line up and vote for one candidate, but that candidate doesn't win,
Right.
that's not democracy, right? So if we're going to say we're going to have democracy, if we're going to say we're going to have democracy, let's actually have democracy. Let's not have a mockery of democracy. So that's what I mean.
So let me ask
it seems like you.
So let me ask you, how do you tie this back to America? I mean, when you talk about democracy in Africa, where could we be a contribution? And I heard what Munch T said, you know, as far as the different programs. I'm not talking about governmental programs. I'm talking about government as itself, as an entity in itself. Government has the resources to take it to the next level, right? So that's totally different than a small mom and pop or even a couple of $1 million corporations that could make a difference. How can we show a strength of the motherland's utilization like China does? Like China got involved and they really utilize the EB-5 visas, right? See how people have come here as Russians and the people have come here from all these different countries. But when we talk about building a financial relationship, when we talk about commodities and trades and goods that will help the continent and also help us as Black Americans, how does all that tie together, if it can tie together?
All right, that's a very good question. That's a very, let me, if you guys can mute yourself, there's a little bit of feedback, and then Muchi, you got it, then it goes to Garnett. So now, okay, Tunaja, if you could just mute yourself for a second.
Okay, so
all right. So Muchi, let me just answer the question, and then you have the floor next. All right. So look at for example, look at what China does with Africa. For example, it's a beneficial relationship for China just as much as it is for Africa, because, for example, China needs to be building things. That's just what their economy relies on. To the point where if you go to China, you'll see they have a bunch of ghost cities. Because a large segment of their economy is based on construction, but they've essentially built enough homes and roads and everything for 20 generations. So they've exhausted that. So now what they do is they'll go to an African country and say, hey, look, you guys need a metro system. You don't have a metro system. Like like MARTA or the MTA or the train in New York. They'll say, you know what, in Lagos, you guys need a train. Here's a proposal for this train. Don't worry about funding. We will fund the train. We'll give you a loan to build this train because we need to build a train, and you guys need a train because this city is going to be the largest city in the world by the end of the century. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this train, and you're going to take a loan, and you're going to pay it off in 10 years. So they're coming in with a plan. They're coming in with a complete package. To the point where all you have to say is, this makes sense. Carry on. Right now, if we had enough brothers and sisters on this side to say, you know what, look at what China's doing. Why can't we replicate the same thing? We have enough professionals here. We have enough people with a certain understanding. Why can't we get them together and say, you know what? Let's go do this in this country. Look at this need that we have in this country. Let's go do this in this African country. The same agreements that these African nations are signing with China, we'll get them to sign with whatever consortium that we put together on this side.
Because we don't have a power base. There can be a coup here, be a coup there.
Many African Americans did do that.
Taken apart.
It's Muchi, and then Tunaja, and Shirley, if you have any other questions, or if that didn't answer your question, please chime in now.
To some extent, if I can interject, since I put the question on the floor. I think the question, and that's the challenge within government, working with the president. And I was a surrogate for Donald Trump in 2016 through his first administration. I'm hoping that he gets back in office, but that's a whole nother conversation. Look, if we need to know anything as Black people, we need to know what the ask is. We need to know what the ask and the want is. I don't know what your people need. So we don't know what you need to know what the ask is so that we could package this to create the same type of a scenario that you mentioned that China provided with the bridge. I totally agree with you on that. I've studied that. I get that. but I'm not in Africa. You and Dinus and a lot of you on this panel have been to Africa or from Africa. And though you know America has the resources to do that. If you're going to have a country that I'm from that has the resources and a continent or a nation of people who have the ask, number one, I would say, what is the ask that you need? And number two, how do we benefit as African Americans who are descendants of slaves in this country? If we put a proposal and ask for an executive order, or we ask for a proposal for an alliance like an EB-5 visa or some type of bill that there's money that are going to be allocated to contribute to us, to help us with the privatized prisons and the situation with the homeless and the mentally ill within our country, within our people, and the housing issues that are going on within our people. There needs to be a tie back to helping those of us in this country, other than people feeling like myself. We are African Americans and we're being brained, but we're being utilized based on our color and our skin, and not on what we should be getting benefits from.
Until Black Americans, until we're the problem is that we're just too.
Yeah, hey, Garnett, before you go, Mucci has the floor. Mucci has the floor, then it goes to Garnett.
Okay, go ahead. Just speaking as an African American, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So one thing I wanted to say, especially to Garnett, I do not agree that you keep saying democracy will not work in Africa. I live next door to Botswana. Botswana is a functional democratic system. Mauritius, I've been to Mauritius, is a function. You can nod your head, but that just shows me you don't have knowledge when you just shake your head. When I'm telling you, Botswana is a functional democratic country. Anyway, Ebube, the other point I wanted to make is this. You know how China developed? China developed primarily because they set up state enterprises, right? That were funded by the tax dollars. They brought in all these European American companies, right? But they gave them conditions. They said, you're going to work with us, but there's going to be technology transfer. There's going to be knowledge transfer, right? For a set period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. By that time, their local people were able to take over these enterprises, right? Now you're talking about China. They are building commercial jetliners. They never had this technology. When Boeing was going into China, they were given conditions that they had to have technology transfer, right? Now you pick it back there to Africa. There is no reason today why Europeans and Americans should be coming to Africa, taking raw materials, taking platinum, taking gold, taking diamonds, without beneficiation on the continent, right? Now, when I talk about Botswana, Botswana is one of those few places where De Beers, they moved their headquarters from England to Botswana. Why? Because Botswana was insisting that the processing of diamonds should be done in country, not overseas. So what I'm saying is most of our leaders in Africa, until we get leaders that are patriotic, because I don't think the solutions are out there. It's not rocket science. It's just that we have people in place who are more concerned about their personal pockets instead of the national project. Like, let's develop the individual countries. Let's develop Africa. We can do this overnight because we have the raw material. We have the leverage. I will tell you this. These companies will still come to Africa because we have the raw materials. But we cannot let them keep taking the raw materials, and they take the raw materials, and when they come back and sell us a car, we pay 20, 30, 40 times multiple how much we sold them the steel. We sell crude oil from Nigeria, right? But when you buy back the refined, the petroleum products, they are 5, 6, 7 times. We can never get anywhere. So anyway, thanks to the Dangote for building that refinery. Good talking to you guys. I'm out. I'll just listen in and let others speak. But Ebube, I do appreciate your intelligent discourse, because it's always good when we talk based on facts and less based on emotions, and know the limitations of what we may think is possible or not possible. Because the fact is, the U.S. government is under no obligation to help an African government. The tax dollars, they are to be used for the U.S. citizens, but whatever discretionary, based on the geopolitical interest, then yes, they're going to give aid to Africa or Latin America and all that. But Africa should not be waiting for the U.S. to give us anything. We have all the resources. we have the people. And then if we do, where we are lacking, let's invite those companies with expertise and make sure they are training our people. They're doing what they're doing in the continent. And then, hey, we take over from there. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Dynasty, for the platform again.
Definitely. Thank you for your time. Muchi, thank you for your time and your contribution here. It was very
Can
appreciated.
I say something quickly about these things?
Yeah, and then we'll do, after you two, Niger, we'll go back to Garnett, then Shirley, then Ebube will close out.
Can I say something quickly? I think whatever we say, we always have to couch it from the point of view of security, because it's always at the heart of these things. Every time we discuss any other country, if you look at the context that he talked about, like the Chinese making demands that they have to have technology transfer, that was after they became a nuclear power. That was after they built a strong army. If you make demands when you don't have any basis for making that demands, then why would you expect it to be met? Why would you not lose 10 leaders in under 2 years? Why would you not see a world where G20 countries can give themselves $20 trillion of funds when Africa is just lamenting in poverty? Why would you not see a situation whereby you have coups happening all over the place? You will not have civil wars occurring everywhere. If you don't put security at the heart of anything you do, you're just building on sand. You will find instability will still come in, and then everything you've just built will fall again. We've done this for the last 60 years. If you look at what Russia is doing right now, that's what we should learn a lesson from. Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons on the basis that these nations are going to protect it from what is happening now.
I'm applauding that one. I thought about that earlier when he was talking about Ukraine. I said Ukraine leveraged their point of power when they gave up their nuclear weapons. Thank you very much.
You can't
just like Gaddafi.
You can't outsource the survival of your nation and your people to any other power in this world. If we have not learned that lesson by now, we should be the most paranoid group on this earth.
Come on now, preach. Now you're preaching.
Everything has to be based on that. Whenever you want to do anything, we as Africans, because we have people, we have 1 billion people on the continent. That's black people, and their population is growing. Uganda has an average age of 16 years. Mali, that we are talking about, is at the topic here, has got 20,000 soldiers, and it is bordering a country, Algeria, that has got 700,000. You know the only difference? The other one is not black. We have to change our mindset. If we don't figure that one out first, and what I would say, if our African American brothers can help us with anything, is to give Africa a blanket to heal, because America is at the top of the line when it comes to the people keeping that continent the way it is. And if you tell them, you know what, because look at Europe now, anything happens in Europe, America takes care of them. America takes care of England, takes care of France. But when it comes to Africa, there's nobody lobbying for our interest. So they come in and they force us to do what we want to do. Kagame actually said this, that because even fairly used clothes that Kagame said they should not bring it to his country anymore, they use AGOA to penalize Rwanda. Something that's supposed to be meant for trade. He says, don't bring fairly used clothes into our country anymore. Use that to penalize him. Every policy that they use is to keep our continent down. And the reason why they can do that is because you cannot defend yourself. Guess what? The only country that voted against this thing, that supported what Russia is doing in the UN from Africa, is Eritrea. Eritrea is the only country that could speak its mind and say, you know what, US, you are the one that keep crawling towards Russia constantly. And when they react, now you're acting as if you didn't expect it to happen. And the reason why Eritrea can do that, guess what? They have one of the strongest military per their population in that continent, and they have one of the highest literacy rates. If anything we do, if we don't couch it behind security, because that is how the world works, everything else you build will fail. The last 60 years has proven it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
It's always a pleasure.
Go ahead, Garnett.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, thank you first of all, man, for having this platform. I guess we're closing it out. But man, what I can say, man, it's a pipe dream. Democracy it will not work for us as black people because we have too many varieties of black people just on the continent, let alone the black people here in the diaspora. The thing is that what Niger was just talking about, collective security and all of that, until people see themselves as the same thing, you're not going to have collective security. You can't look at China as an example. They're a bad example for us in most cases because most Africans don't understand the Chinese are like 80% Han ethnic Chinese. That's why they run roughshod over the Uyghurs than any other ethnic group that is being approached by the West or feeling like they want to be heard or whatever. They just run roughshod over them because they understand that just doesn't work. Everybody having an opinion, that does not work. Less for black folks. There's too many of us, and there's too many different kinds of us because we're the first race on the planet. Democracy will continue to divide the continent because you have very intelligent brothers like Ebube. You got intelligent brothers in Senegal. You got intelligent brothers that are, think that they're Arabs because they're from Sudan. Everybody's gonna have an opinion. The only thing that's gonna change that is, carrying a big stick and telling you, hey, this is the new system. This is how it's gonna be. Because the African militaries are really, you have some good ones, but we should as black men thinking on panels like this and sisters of like mind, we should be coming up with something here in the next 20, 30 years to say, hey, we can build our own private military or something. We can put our agents in different African corporations, or we can start up these whatever. Because I don't give a damn about the technicalities, man. I'm just looking at the reality of it. You think you know something, but I'm telling you this is the way the continent needs to go. I'd rather kill you, unfortunately, because don't you see that's the way the world is? This is the world is based on this. To be trying to think that we're gonna give them some type of beautiful democracy because we Africans, we got a better spirit. That's bullshit. I'm sorry to cuss. No. That's BS. That's BS. And that's dangerous. That's very dangerous. No. That's very dangerous. And it does not work. It's the only way this is gonna work is if everybody else in the world is like that, and nobody else in the world is like that. We got nuclear capabilities. When you talk about South Africa, they still have Pelindaba, the nuclear site down there. I think some Arabs tried to go in and steal some state secrets, but we don't need to steal state secrets too, Niger.
Nigeria gave up
think like that. What do you want to do? What do you want your grandkids? Where do you want your grandkids? Where do you want your grandkids? Where do you want your great grandkids? These white folks are gonna try to put us back in slavery, and y'all are talking about democracy? Come on, man. For the discussion, I understand, but it's BS. It's never worked. Soon as you elect a Democratic leader, and if he's a good dude like Thomas Sankara, they kill him. So we have to do that ourselves. Thomas Sankara, his problem was that he was only over Burkina Faso. He didn't have the collective security of everybody else. You get what I'm saying? Gaddafi was on the cusp of doing it, but he got his son, who was educated in the West, coming back home to tell him, Dad, get rid of the weapons. Get the weapons that you have, get rid of them so they can bring us back into the fold of the nations. And then what they do with them in 2011. You got to carry a big stick. This is the grand chessboard, man. Democracy sucks.
ECOWAS is carrying a big stick, and
where
is looking to
where are they carrying a big stick?
Nigeria is weak right now. That is the biggest problem. But when Nigeria was strong, you can see that they were able to pull their weight. So when Nigeria gets its act together, I think Nigeria is one leader away from doing that. I don't know. Let me just ask Ebube this: who do you support from the crop of candidates in Nigeria now?
Oh, that's you don't even need to ask. You already
I'm voting
know.
for the Niger Delta Avengers, man.
Let me go ahead and answer that one. So now for president, of course, I support a very charismatic leader, and his name is Ebube Okoli, and his vice president is Prince Dinas the Bear. Those two are going to be able to run the board. 2023 we're coming. But
just put me in your state security apparatus, man. Just stick me in there.
Be Minister of Defense. Why not? And tonight, job be Minister of Mass Media. But on a more serious note, with that, but before I just want to thank Garnett. Thank you for your contributions. We don't always have to agree with everything we say, but we have to always try to understand each other. We don't have to agree, but we have to understand. We don't have to agree, but we have to
You want the
understand.
survival of the black race like I do, right?
Always. So now I appreciate everything that you brought to this. Nigeria, of course, you always come with a very unique perspective. I don't always agree, but I always understand the perspective.
Did you just give us a politician's answer?
No, I'm gonna get to 2023 in a second, brother.
I just give us a politician's answer. Who do you support?
I just told you my candidate. No, but I'm gonna tell you my real candidate in a second. But I just wanted to thank Garnett, Moochie, of course, Shirley, Tonight Ja. I would give you a compliment, but I think your head is big enough. But in regards to 2023,
seriously,
I personally will say that I'm not really impressed with the candidates that have presented themselves so far. Ideally, what I was hoping for with all the momentum and everything that's happened is that the youth, who make up 70% of the population, would have a consensus candidate. Because if the youth have a consensus candidate, that person is going to win because we make up 70% of the population. We don't have that. We're still being divided among the old guard who are coming in, sharing 5,000 naira and lining people up to vote for them. So if this is what we're going to do, it really doesn't matter because we're not going to get the proper president we need based on what I'm seeing now.
Have you looked into Governor Ayade of Cross River?
It doesn't seem like he's really pushing forward like some of the other candidates. So I figured maybe his candidacy might not have taken off like some of the other candidates.
Look into him then, because I really want to get some other person's opinion from overseas, because his record seems to be very strong and he's running. He's doing Burna Boy moves on stage and trying to rally the youth, obviously. Because when I see him, he's a professor from what I gather, and he's a senator, he's been a governor, and relatively very popular. And I feel like compared to all the leaders that have been in Nigeria till now, when I hear him talk, his worst performance will be better than all the rest put together. That is how much. And I feel like maybe if you listen to him and, next time when you come on, I get your opinion, because maybe it's just me. I've had people talk, and I've had that guy use words that I've not even heard in the West.
Interesting.
So
with PDP, what I'll say with APC, what I think preliminarily, this could all just be conjecture. With me personally, I think the strongest candidates in PDP or APC first, then I'll get to PDP. PDP or APC, of course, has Tinubu. He's having his issues, but he's also a strong contender. There's within the APC, you have the vice president. He is looking to make his moves. And you also have Rotimi or Chibike Amechi, depending on which name goes first or second. But you have Amechi, you have Tinubu, and you have the vice president. And that's what I would say would be the top three contenders in the APC. In PDP, I would say the top three contenders currently, this could all change in the next 6 months, are Atiku, of course, he has the money and he has the leverage. Peter Obi, of course, his VP last time. If it goes to the South, he has a strong claim. And then in PDP, you potentially have Governor Wike. He's been making some overtures towards potentially running.
Dangerous, yeah.
Yeah, so those are the three who may take it. And I'd really like to see more from them before I would support either or any of those candidates. Like I said, I'd prefer if the youth actually christens their own candidate and we have that voice to actually push forward. And it doesn't have to be a PDP or APC. It could be a third-party candidate. As long as the youth were behind him or her, they could definitely win. So that's how I see it. The top three in PDP, top three in APC.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you. At least I think you gave me a very clean answer there. Nice one. And look into Ayade because I think he's an interesting guy.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely. It's a pleasure having you. It's always a pleasure speaking.
And Shirley, go ahead and close us out, Shirley.
Hey, family, I just want to thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to have a clarity and as well as a lesson of understanding America and Africa and where Africa stands in this fight that's taking place. I love what you said at the beginning when we finally were able to get you to have a complete sentence, which is that this is an issue between Russia and Ukraine. These are family members that are fighting. And I think as America, our eyes are watching, but we also have to realize we have our own issues at home here. We have our own financial issues. We have our own people issues. And if we as African Americans can feel more comfortable with Africans, because we have had our differences with people from other countries or from the motherland who have taken advantage of saying, well, we're Black and we're not like you. If we can get away from you, we're not like you, which I still feel like that right now still. And we can find an alliance to better benefit both people, the African Americans as the African American descendants of slaves. Instead of us throwing rocks to each other, how do we find that common ground? And right now, I don't see that. I see us really focused on what the government and democracy of Africa that's going on. I see that when you have a Democrat president like we have right now, we're finding us focusing on other countries and continents, and we have gotten away from, when people don't like this word, but I'm gonna say it anyway, make America great. If we can't make African American great, and we're going to be distracted and leveraged off of by saying, well, Black Lives Matter, but it really doesn't matter because you're just leveraging that terminology for some other hidden agenda, we will not move forward as people in this country. So I look forward to seeing you come back on, brother, and talk about how gas and the crude oil is affected by this, and things that really affect us as the people on both sides of the continent on an everyday living. But thank you for having me on your show, Dinus. If you guys want to follow me, I'm on Instagram, and you can follow me on YouTube. When I do videos, mostly I just kind of pop in on different shows, and I appreciate you for giving me that opportunity.
No, for sure. Hey, everyone. Go ahead, Bobby. Go ahead, Bube. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just following up saying it was a pleasure speaking with you, Shirley. Great insight, great contribution.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, peace.